Farm for Profit Podcast. Take a listen, have a blast. Farm for Profit Podcast. Learn about farming while having a laugh. Farm for Profit Podcast.
Hey folks, if you're hanging out next to, around, on the aisle of the Maya booth out here at Husker Harvest Days, we're about ready to start a podcast episode. You're welcome to stick around and hang out. We also have great Maya folks here to answer any questions about this beautiful cornhead sitting next to us and a super fun race car sitting out in front.
It is. I got to sit in it this morning.
You did. You almost didn't get back out.
Barely got out. I had to use a little grease.
We learned that there's only 9 volts to the roof, so we probably would have gotten you out if you couldn't have done it by yourself.
I don't know. There's a little cage in there. It still would have been tough.
Listeners, we appreciate you no matter where you are and when you're listening. As always, if you've got topics or guests of interest, send those to farmforprofitllc@gmail.com. You can also text them to us or leave us a voicemail at 515-207-9640. We're focusing a lot this fall, Corey, on episodes that directly impact the bottom line of our listeners.
Yeah, it seems to be the hot topic, right? As it should be, right? Everyone's worried about it.
Pretty much should have been the focus of our episodes all along, but it's good to really put an emphasis on it right now when it matters.
Right. Yep.
What's one of the ways that we can improve profits on our farm?
We can raise more product.
Can raise more product. So that's what we're going to focus on today in this episode. We've got other conversations that will focus on other aspects of your farming business, but very specifically today, we've got a couple of guests that are good at raising more product.
Just a couple?
Isn't a couple 3? A few is 3.
A few.
Shoot. Sorry.
Who's the
Sorry,
hard one?
Alex. I didn't mean to. Yeah.
I'm out of this game.
Yeah.
He's the one that's missing out.
So, yes, we've got Alex Noll. I should have asked if that's how you pronounce it.
Yes,
Noll?
correct. Yep.
And Matt. It's Matt Fellow on my paper. It's not Matt Fellow.
Turecek.
Tariq. Jeez, I wouldn't have even guessed that.
Yeah, and if you spell it, you'll never pronounce it right.
I'm spelling it the way I want to
That's
pronounce
perfectly fine.
it. Then we've got Jenna from the AgXplore team hanging out with us. Thanks for braving the crowd this morning, getting into Husker Harvest Days to sit down and have a conversation.
Worth it.
You sure? Are you sure?
We'll find out afterwards.
We'll start with that right now.
So before we dive into the nuts and bolts of this, let's get some background about all three of you. Let's start with Jenna. You know, what do you do? Where'd you grow up? Where do you live now?
Yeah, so I grew up in south central Kansas, just south of Wichita, Kansas is actually where I hail from. Went to Kansas State University, and that's how I ended up in northeast Kansas. I'm about 7 miles south of the Nebraska border right now, up in God's country in northeast Kansas. So I am the Eastern Kansas dealer sales representative for AgXplore. So I work with people like Matt, who work with people like Alex, and that's how I got tied in with this group here and ended up here today.
Okay.
So, KSU grad, sports fan?
Absolutely.
Sorry about your loss.
Sorry about your loss.
I somehow knew that was going to come up today, yeah.
We didn't make it more than 4 minutes into the show, and we're going to take a shot across the
We have
bow.
to take
You know,
it when we can get it.
That's a little longer than I expected it to take for that to come, so...
What a cool experience, though, for those young athletes to be able to play football in Ireland.
Absolutely.
That field looked like absolute trash.
Mm-hmm. They could not paint lines.
No. No. And if you're wondering what the heck we're talking about, Iowa State beat KSU over in Ireland, and I think they repainted the lines twice while live on TV, and you still couldn't tell where the goal line was.
Yeah.
I think they should have, instead of Farmageddon, I think they should have called that the Slop Fest, because it was a mess over there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Touche. Thanks again for joining us and for hooking us up with these folks. Matt, why don't you dive into yourself, tell a little bit about your connection to agriculture.
Yeah, so believe it or not, I started my farming venture in eastern Colorado. All dry land country, nothing but winter wheat, summer fallow half the ground every year. Family still farms out there. I've folded up shop out there and moved to northeast Kansas in 2013 and started from scratch. Brought 50 head of cattle and no equipment and sold 500 acres and bought 160 and started farming in northeast Kansas. And been doing that since then. It's been a go. Great experience.
What crops are you raising now?
Corn, soybeans, and some wheat. Yeah.
And still got the cows?
Still got the cows. Yeah.
Meet Maya Cornheads, built better for over 40 years to power through down corn, high yields, and tough fields without flinching.
These durable, low-maintenance heads mean less downtime, less grain loss, and more profit per acre. They have the option for down corn attachments or direct-driven chopping. They ensure that your combine will move smoothly, fast, and full at all times.
Don't just harvest your fields, conquer them. Visit mycornheads.com to find the dealer near you.
2013. Try to think of what that's a long time for me to remember what the weather was like. Of course, I don't know what Kansas weather
it would
was
be
like.
12. 12 was the real bad drought.
Yep.
Terrible drought.
I missed out on that. I came the year after that. Prices were really high in 2013 because the drought was there in 12. So
Yeah.
that was a decent jump for
A good way to kick off.
Good way to kick off. Yeah,
That's
good
good.
way to start. But
What?
yeah, it's been a journey.
We're going to
Been a
dive
journey.
deeper into that. I still find the aspect of summer fallow interesting.
Yeah.
Like what discipline that takes to just not plant half your crops.
Well, when you're playing the insurance game, you only plant half the crops if you want insurance.
Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah, because it can't be insured. Can't be insured. And out there, a good wheat crop was 25, 30 bushel. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, we're talking 9 inches a year.
arid
9 inches
country.
of rain, 9 to 11 inches
Yeah.
of rain a year. And so my ability, my reason for growing more crops was to go where it rains.
Okay, first
You went to
advice.
So I moved to Northeast Kansas where it went from 9 or 11 to 25 to 30.
Yeah, because you guys get a lot of like the same rains we do in Iowa that come up through there sometimes.
Yeah. Northeast corner of Kansas is not anything like the rest of Kansas.
Yeah. Yep.
Good. All right. Alex.
Yeah, so we farmed 800 acres when I graduated high school. Grew up on the fender of a 66 Series International tractor. Didn't really ever see myself probably doing anything any different. Land is tough, tough to acquire, about like any area. Very fortunate that, I guess, blessing and a curse with my dad and my grandfather didn't have a whole lot of land. And so that allowed me to actually get off the farm and made a lot of connections. We've got a great group of landowners that we farm for. Been able to over 5X that, in about a 15-year period.
Okay.
And obviously incurred a lot of growing pains. But I guess this would circle back, principally to what your focus is for this podcast. But with those growing pains and ability to endure that and make it work, I had to have more bushels. I needed that extra 5 or 10 over what was standard practice in the area, and I would say that's what got me, into that kind of the higher yield world, is that, diving into some of those rabbit holes, that most people are scared to go into.
Right.
And, and we've got 160 mama cows, and then we got a full-time guy that farms with us, and my dad's 71. He's still active in the farm. Mm-hmm. And so we've got plenty going on for this manpower that we got, but I've had a lot of success at that. And ultimately it's kind of I guess a little counterintuitive, that in a low grain market you're still trying to produce more bushels, but ultimately, if you don't have anything to sell,
Well, we call that bushel on your way out.
right. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, you got your break even at APH, and hopefully you produce
100%,
over your APH.
right. And those sometimes those top few bushels are the ones that really count.
Yep.
And you say Kansas also?
Yeah, so home base would be about 20 miles east of Matt. We're 45 minutes north and east of Topeka, about an hour west of Kansas City,
Okay.
kind of up in that northeast corner.
Yep.
Jefferson County.
Now, you described something there while you were giving your introduction there that I don't think I've heard it said that way before. And you said that you have a lot of landowners that you work for, a lot of great landowners that you work for.
Yeah.
We don't usually
Yep.
hear that phrase. I assume that's
I rent, I lease, I farm their ground,
by landlords.
Yep.
Well, that is the way I look at it. Whether they acquired that land by purchasing it, by inheritance, however the means necessary, ultimately we like to, or I value that as a partnership, and we have a lot of share crop rental arrangements, and essentially there's just as much incentive for them to have a high yield as there is for me.
Right.
And I like to think it goes both ways, or in our opinion.
Yeah, that share crop thing, I've started doing that the last few years, and I really do like that too. I noticed that it's a team working together.
Yeah,
right?
and obviously it's just like anything. I guess it boils down to trust, principally. And so but ultimately I've always looked at it and approached like because I wouldn't say that we scrimp on any inputs regardless of the direction, but we're still after that highest ROI.
Yep.
And I feel like that side of it is easier to present from a balance or from a relationship standpoint. That I've got just as much skin in the game as you do. And here we're after the same goal.
Yep.
Essentially.
What a great segue into exactly what we were going to ask to start off with. Just yielding more doesn't make you more profitable. There's a balance between the investment that you put into the crop and what you're expected to get as a return. So, Matt, when you think about your approach to deciding what you're going to put in this crop, what are the groceries we're going to throw at this? How do you go about making that first step of evaluating that?
Everybody would say yield, but I don't know if that's necessarily the right answer because return on investment is obviously the key. So yeah, we look to see what you see for yields improvements with the products we use that I would use, but we also got to look at what that product costs to apply onto that field or at that time.
Where did you guys even start? Like, at what point did you go, this is the way it's been done, but now I got to do this?
Well, I guess that's a good thing to say. I mean, I would say in reality, I don't follow the rule. I mean, not many people have moved from Eastern Colorado and started from scratch and done it and followed the rule.
Right.
I mean, if I was to do that, I would still be in Eastern Colorado.
Yeah.
Nothing against being in Eastern Colorado, but that's the facts of it.
Yep.
So I guess I was always looking for the next big, better thing to do to improve my farm, whether that meant improving it yield or improving it by return. Whatever that may be, that's what I would be looking for is the next best thing. I feel like technology is always improving, and we're not young, but we're not old in the farming world either. That we need to be tracking what's new and what technologies are out there because there is a lot of good stuff out there. You just got to understand how to use it.
One of the big things that we talked about actually on the way up here was these guys and their drive to find efficiencies. And I think that is probably one of the deciding factors for you guys as well as to what new things to try is, what's inefficient in our operation and how can we make that more efficient.
We did talk a lot about that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's keep going.
And I feel like that, and I don't know, maybe it's just the way I look at it, or maybe it's the generation or whatever, but I do feel like, generally speaking in ag, and whether it's Eastern Colorado or Northeastern Kansas or Iowa or where, I feel like we do carry too many like sort of preconceived notions, that, and Corey, you were touching on that, that we have this kind of precedence that, and I don't know if that's a fear mongering deal from your ag retailer or from a neighbor or what it is, but that we're so afraid of stepping out of that bubble that we're not afraid to back off a rate of fertilizer or try something different or whatever. And I feel like those preconceived notions sometimes are the hugest limiting factor in ag today, that and whatever the reason may be, and I like to as far as that's how I got started into some contest stuff originally, was that I had a couple of niche creek bottoms, and I thought, what, I can, kind of a sandbox type of a deal.
Okay.
I can go there, I can play a little bit, try some things. Well, it's interesting how many of those things entered my first NCGA contest in 2013. And I feel like that a lot of those, or not all those things, and there's obviously been significantly more that didn't work than did, but a lot of those things have implemented, to where then, what? Try 10% of it. If you saw significant results, and I don't think it matters necessarily, what yield spectrum you're in. Typically, your biggest bushels are going to come more commonly with your highest ROI.
Yep.
And so I've been able to use, kind of the small scale approach or the sandbox approach, so to speak, that to be able to try some of those things and not just preconceive a bunch of notions or disregard them, disregarding something before you ever even try it.
Yeah.
And of course, that just usually opens up another door or another rabbit hole. That you end up with a whole
Whole nother set of questions.
right. Commonly, yes.
So to be curious is good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And not be afraid to step out.
Probably also knowing people like Jenna and her team to be able to ask the right questions or to not know what you're not asking is probably valuable as well.
Well, absolutely. And I feel like that, and I talked to John and Jenna, and we've had this conversation before, but I don't know that in the high yield world necessarily that there's just any silver bullets remaining. I mean, I think they've probably all been used, or from what I've seen, they're all used up. But it's the little intricacies. One of my landowners had a pulling tractor for years, and he had a hot dog advertisement on the side of it, and that caption was, "It's the little extras that make the big difference." And you take your standard hot dog and a bun, but you add relish, ketchup, mustard, whatever you fits your palate. And I feel like that's kind of where we're at right now in ag today with the high yielding, and whether it's transitioning from a conventional practice to strip till, or maybe you need to be looking into foliar feed. MAP's $1,000 a ton. We need to find a way to be more efficient and as much, if not more, efficacy.
Yep.
Matt, do you have any contest acres?
I don't.
Yeah, so you just go off of what Alex says?
Yeah, I just fall out. Yeah. No. No. Yeah, I don't have any contest acres. I've thought about it, but I don't know if I have quite that niche dirt like he's got that he's running his on.
So it's interesting though, but does it take being a gentleman, a woman that's entering contests like this? Is that the prerequisite for I know how to make high yields? Or is that just who it's documented? Do we have listeners across the country that are already doing this on their farms, but just don't enter the game?
I
would say so.
Yeah, I would say so. I originally entered a contest just as kind of a deal to push myself internally. That I could, I can show you climate maps, and well, Corey, that farm made X number of bushels or whatever. But I felt like that kind of set somewhat of a benchmark. Now, obviously, there's other things that come into play, getting to talk to you guys today here at Grand Island, and getting to work with great people from the AgXplore team, but I felt like that is kind of set an internal benchmark for myself, that allowed, so I could continue to push, and there's years that you step back and there's a lot of good farmers in the country. And so, and you're competing with a lot of them. And,
What are your numbers? Because we haven't even said it to the audience yet. What's been your highest corn yield?
So last year, a little over 340 dry land, and just shy of 329 irrigated.
Oh.
And then my wheat was 133.1 last year, and this year was better. But I'll wait until they
publish.
Wait until they.
And you got corn in this year too, but you probably haven't harvested it.
Correct. Yeah.
But how's that looking?
Real close. I don't think we'll have the numbers we had last year. We had a tough finish. I've always been
we were off to the races. We were on the path to have as good or better than last year.
Well past. Yeah. We were up to late vegetative. Yes. We were trending not maybe significantly better, but better.
Yep.
And we had some, I don't know if you guys maybe have heard of Southern Rust.
Oh, yeah. We've got it in Iowa.
I didn't know if you'd heard of it.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
If you got it in Southern Iowa, if you got it in Iowa, you know how it was in Kansas. Because it's got to go through us to get to you.
Never seen it show up the 4th of July.
Yeah.
And
wow.
Yeah, it just, crippling. And so that would maybe lead into, some potential changes in management, and maybe not even so much on my farm, but I think a lot of people will value a fungicide pass regardless of commodity market.
Mm-hmm.
I think that will be something that there'll be some guys that'll have that as a takeaway.
Yeah.
That they need to change a management strategy.
Yep.
It's been very interesting in our area. If you had it aerial applied, if it didn't get to the corner or your field had a jog out and that didn't get covered, it is very clear where the fungicide was
Oh yeah.
and where it
Night
wasn't.
and day difference.
Give that airplane guy a score on how good a job he did.
Right, exactly. The drone guys too. I mean,
No, absolutely.
it's-
We fly drones. I have a drone business myself, so we know all about that. And how
It's-
good a job you did or not. It shows up this year.
It does, and that's nothing against drone guys because it can be done correctly and it can be done with a little bit of haste and
We're all just still
inexperience.
learning.
But
Yep,
well, and I
absolutely.
feel like the problem, to some extent, with some of those, and I'm not picking on an aerial application deal or looking for a political bait necessarily, even though I own a Heggie. But
We had to hit that in.
I had to throw that in. But I do feel like that sometimes that is hard on good products and good, the products that AgXplore has. A misconception in an application efficacy it can develop a bad rap. And it seemed like too quickly they're real quickly to scornful something or abolish it, but very very unlikely to take it back for a second chance.
Yep. Or figure out why it didn't work.
Or figure out why it didn't work with the root of the problem.
Yep.
Walk us through your grower standards, both of you. Like, what do you do on your just commercial acres, corn, wheat, whatever? How are you strip till? What's your rotation? All
Yeah.
that?
Well, I guess I'll start.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
So, been running. Well, most everybody in our area still does anhydrous. So we do put anhydrous down. Some guys are strip till and some guys are not. I bought a strip till bar and been running strip till, running my dry down the road with it. Seem to be liking that. This will be year 2. Got some trials out, running different percentages.
Yep.
50%, 100%, 40%. We'll see where it comes out at. Haven't harvested those acres yet. So everybody around our area is going to be running anhydrous, strip tilling, or just straight anhydrous, and then going back and planting. We don't. Pretty much everybody's no-till. Don't see much.
Predominantly.
Yeah, there's almost very little tillage at all in our area. And then obviously we'll plant our crop, and then we'll do a pre-burn down, and then we'll post it. And fungicide, seems like fungicide is becoming more and more common all the time.
Yep.
And then we'll top dress our corn, and in our area we still get nitrate. So most guys around our area are spreading over the top V6-ish, V8 sometimes taller. We talked about
In that conversation.
that conversation on the way up here, but top dressing with some nitrate over the top, and then get pretty much. I think that'd be it. We do a lot of fall spraying too.
Yeah.
A lot of fall spraying too.
Yeah.
I think that pretty much covers
Yeah,
it.
I mean, we do plant some corn on corn.
Yes, that's right.
Our corn on corn is pretty much conventional till.
Okay.
That's the only way. And most of that, or where we're following corn on corn, is on some higher yield environments. And and we were one of the very few ones, or one of the first ones that bought a ground rig. Saw exactly what you were talking about on yield maps for years. Well, it was the fungicide doesn't work, or it only pays on your best acre kind of a deal. And so it wasn't really the fungicide's fault it wasn't getting applied, how we wanted it on our farm. We're rolling lots of rolling tile terrace. We are able to straight track plant most everything.
Yeah.
And so we can run our old passes from post and run with the rows. And we have a 132-foot boom Heggie, and probably the most valuable piece of, or one of the most valuable piece of equipment on our farm. We do wide drop our bottoms. We're a small balance of some river and creek bottoms, but mostly rolling hills. Anhydrous, low rates anhydrous in the fall, and then come back and we top dress our hills with urea and AMS or nitrate and AMS,
Yep.
and then following, in our straight track stuff in the bottoms, we'll wide drop. We got capabilities to wide drop, sometimes multiple passes.
Okay.
And I don't have a Haggie, so I went with the drone application.
Okay.
Well, you can have a Haggie or two, and it can be too wet to where you have to go with the drone app.
That's how I had the.
We've actually Alex has called me a few times even this season,
we
and
have.
I've come and done a couple applications with the drone to get him by.
Since 2019, when I bought my first Haggie, I always left that as a joke that in Northeast Kansas, I will take my chances on it being wet in July. Obviously, Corey, you kind of chew on your tongue a little bit now. Typically rain makes grain, but it can make the logistical side of it a little challenging.
Yep. Yeah, we finally pulled the plug. I mean, we got a day and a half of spraying, and that was great. And then just couldn't do it anymore.
That's
so
what
we
we ran into.
hired the drones, and we're glad we did.
Oh, absolutely.
We can see it.
Yep.
We can see. We found some streaking, but you can definitely tell where you didn't spray with the drone.
Yeah.
Right, so
and so this is I mean, we can go down this rabbit hole or not, but this is year 5 for me with the drones now. So I got into it pretty much right as soon as we were available to get into them.
Yep.
And I would say a lot of it is application, the applicator, how he's doing it, how he's running the machine, how good a job that you get done.
So let's not go too far, but what are the keys to be a good applicator of that?
Height above the crop,
Okay.
speed, and droplet size.
And where should all those be?
I would say it is manufacturer specific,
Okay.
somewhat. But I would say really 12 to 14 feet is probably going to be prime. Not much over 30 feet per second.
Okay, so slower.
Yes, too fast. Too fast, you turn into a plane.
Okay.
You lose your propeller swash.
Okay.
And droplet sizes into that medium range, so you're talking that 300-ish, 250-ish micron size.
Okay.
We did some last year. We had tar spot worse last year than we did this year. And the guys were running that 400 micron or higher. We were seeing tar spot. It wasn't stopping it.
Okay.
And it does mess with your pattern, obviously. Your 30-foot swath.
Okay. So there's
That's
a few
good to
nuggets
know.
there.
Yep.
Right?
I do like that. I do want to go clear back to close to the beginning when Jenna talked about the conversation y'all had in the truck on the way up here about efficiencies. We really didn't get into what she even meant by that conversation. So before we ask them, what did you mean by sometimes you can explore more profitability per acre by identifying efficiencies?
Yeah, so really when we talk about efficiencies, you guys already have, your plants out there. You invested in getting it in that ground, right? And so how do we make that plant more efficient? How do we get more yield out of that plant? Whether that's early season, late season, before we even get in the field. That's kind of what we were talking about on the way up here is what areas of the crop are we looking at inefficiencies and how do we fix that? This year, a lot of our conversation on the way up here was about fertility cost, right? So when MAP is, astronomical and your anhydrous is more than you really want to be paying for, how do we make those more efficient? But I think that changes the conversation every year as we look at what we're dealing with in that crop year, because no year is the same, right? You can't plan for next year looking at this year, and you can't plan for this year looking at last year. There's so many differences in the ag world from year to year, so it's really very specific to the timing that we're talking about it. It's kind of a lot of the conversation that we had.
I'm glad that you specified because where my mind went, it was less passes across the field. How many things can I put in my tank mix? What can I do with the liquid system on my planter? I was going with mechanical efficiencies.
Those are absolutely part of the conversation as well.
But I like the angle of plant efficiency.
That's what I was going to say too. I think it's not necessarily not contradicting what Jenna said, but it's not making. We already know every bag of corn seed is 700, 800 bushel, right? That's what they claim. So I think it's more about protecting that yield than making it make more yield. I want to see that. I already know what's there. The seed says it's there. It's able to produce that. It's protecting it. So I want to make the plant more efficient, not necessarily make it produce more. It's already there to produce it. I just need to make it. Every product I give it, I want it to use it more efficiently. I want it to bring more out of that plant.
Well, we joke all the time. You walk around this trade show and you should have 700 bushel corn because everything.
Well, we talked about that when we were standing over.
819 is the commodity classic 3 years ago. Right?
Sounds like a game.
And the group that was with me, had pretty much thought I'd lost my mind, but that was the number I had derived by taking some averages on about every table in the room, was 819 bushel. And I told him, I said, I see no reason why my contest next year won't make 819 bushel an acre. I said, I'm going to go back through here tomorrow and purchase one of every one of these products and then try to figure out how I'm going to get them in my sprayer and, or planter or whatever the protocol was. But, so yeah, 819, I guess, is actually the right number if you're looking for specifics. But.
Well, we got a target, but I want to know. Okay, so you alluded to the record corn yield that you had.
Yep.
Was that plot profitable?
Yes.
So you made money.
Yes.
Even though you had to throw everything at it.
And But what I've seen in the, when you can kind of generate almost like a microclimate type of a setup, and the biggest challenge we have in our area, and every area has challenges, but biggest challenge we have in our area is a lot of variability, soil types, just a gamut of variability. How we can replicate that, from a small scale, a 10-acre block, and replicate that to, and a lot of times it won't magnify quite as influential, but you can get it to where it, you see a few bushels, or you can, one thing I'll touch on. You meet really good people all over the country. And some of the closest people that I talk to about high yielding stuff are nowhere around Jefferson County, Kansas. But the interesting, caveat of it is that you can pick up little intricacies, everywhere. And that's actually how I got into trying Onward Max from AgXplore, was that, because I've always just dwelled on this, we got to protect this crop clear to the finish. It isn't a race, like some people may determine.
First one to the field at harvest time may not be the
no,
best field.
typically that's usually a reward instead of, but no, that was what got me started running Onward Max, I wanted to protect that top end. If we can, those are your big, it's about like your end rows when you're spraying with a Haggy that the airplane doesn't get. Those are your biggest bushels. Those outside rows that don't get taken care of, those are your biggest bushels. And if we can secure that top end, like that Onward Max does, and that's where we've seen great success with it, is protecting that top end, protecting that plant health.
Late season.
And late season,
PGR
ethylene suppression, late season, and maybe it's 3 days, but if you can slow that period down, and that all goes into, my mind went the same way when we were talking efficiency, but I think even the subject of efficiency would maybe even go into a timing deal, not even like a true dollars and cents. You can write it on a paper and punch it into a calculator. Yep. It might be a timing, and you can mess that up too. But there's things that'll that we've seen that have put 10 bushel on, and if you wait a week or 10 days or 2 weeks, it might have cost you an additional 10. So you got a 20 bushel swing. And like you said, Corey, you finally, and I've kind of been in that situation, sitting on your hands, and you got two, $100,000 machines sitting in the shed, and your hands are tied. I mean, you at some point in time you cut the arm off to save the body. And so here,
gives old Matt a call.
I'm saying that.
I'm 2 weeks out. It'll be $6 an acre.
90% of the time it's Alex calls, and I'm not.
If you want me to be there tomorrow, it's $18.
And if
I don't play that.
And if you want to watch me, it's $20. No kind of a deal.
Sounds like a new service. Do you want to watch? Spectator cost.
I do like that.
You could have like a little trailer with seats on it.
I thought about that because I think we don't need to go down that road either. But you do get a lot more spectators when you're drone flying because you're sitting at the edge of the field and you're not in the machine. So everybody sits by and asks you what you're doing and what's going on.
Harvest season is here, and so is your competitive advantage.
That's right. The Estes XPR3 concaves are a total game changer. Think one concave, all crops, no bands, no switching. From wheat to corn, soybeans, you're rolling non-stop. Backed by their patented technology with 250% more threshing surface, you get cleaner grain, fewer fines, and beast-level capacity, all without trading combines.
If you're interested, visit EstesPerformanceConcaves.com to upgrade your combine today. Estes XPR3, harvest smarter, faster, and better. Before we get too far away from it, though, Jenna, what is Onward Max?
Yeah, so Onward Max is a late season PGR from AgXplore. It's solely focused on exactly what Alex and Matt were talking about here, which is protecting your late season yield. So what that's working with, it's got 3 active PGRs in there, working to mitigate stress in that late season grain fill period. So that works in, whether we're talking corn, whether we're talking soybeans, wheat, it's all a late season stress mitigation effort.
Is that something you guys put in with your fungicide pass, or is it something you do separate?
Yeah, so when we talk about efficiency, AgXplore has really tried to make all of these products fit in at timings that are already going across fields. So that's a fungicide additive
Yep.
at that fungicide timing.
Yep.
So tassel in corn, R2, R3 in soybeans. That's kind of where
Yep.
this product works its best and where it's geared towards.
Yep.
Yeah.
A lot of people have been toting the last couple of years of maybe we're stopping our applications too early, right? Maybe being done at that fungicide pass. And have you guys seen that?
Yeah. We talked a lot about
We
that.
definitely have, and I
Yeah.
think ultimately, it's kind of tough to, I think generally speaking, most all your premium fungicides are going to say at VT. That's your best ROI. That's and I think you need to do your homework and find where regionally specific you can make that work. And obviously, it's got to balance in, with a lower commodity market. But what we've seen is that's about the time we need to be getting rolling good. Obviously, you got to have your, you can't build a house without a foundation,
Yep.
and so, but you still got to put a roof on it once you have the walls framed, and so that's kind of that about the time. And I feel like, like I said, every situation's different. With some of the disease things we've seen, you guys have had tar spot for 5 years,
Yeah.
6 years.
Yeah. At least 5.
I think that's changed a focus a little bit from fungicide timing, and Southern Rust creeps in and doesn't even knock and enters the door
Yeah,
this
yeah,
year.
surprise.
And- yeah, right. You are welcome.
Yeah.
But I think that put a curveball on our program anyway.
Yeah.
And actually maybe I shouldn't say helped us, but where we have kind of erred a little bit on the later side, tar spot maybe being not as prevalent, especially earlier on. We have more heat. Maybe we had a little more defense against it being a little on the later side on our fungicide.
brown silk time.
kind of that R2
Brown
ish.
silk time. Yeah.
Now I want to know, you can't tease us and say that you've learned something, that it was a 10 bushel gain, and if you came back a couple weeks late, it was detrimental to you. What are you talking about? What was it? What mistake did you make?
I don't
know.
I better not say anything. A good magician don't give away all his
Trade
cards and decks. I don't even have long sleeves on.
That's fair. That's fair. That's mean, but that's fair. I know something you don't know.
So on the high yielding deal, something that I have really found fascinating, and we come from Kansas, and of course you probably can't think of Kansas as tabletop flat and wheat as far as you can see.
Sure.
Yeah.
I do think wheat a lot.
We haven't had wheat on our farm since the late 90s, and I cut my third wheat crop this summer in my lifetime. But I feel like it's a lot easier to build something that you know nothing about.
Okay.
Yeah. No preconceived.
Take the preconceived notions out of it. We're a blank canvas. Let's paint a picture. And I feel like that's attributed to some of my high yielding wheat success, just from the simple point. I able to maybe pull a few pages out of my corn playbook, but on the other hand, I don't feel like, or especially in this geography, nobody's talking about high yielding wheat.
Yeah.
We are far enough south. Double crop works well and insurable in our scenario. Obviously, my double crops aren't harvested yet. Kind of trending towards the third year of the highest profitability per acre. High yielding corn or soybeans is not a player in that game. High yielding wheat followed by managed double crops.
Yep.
The soybeans.
Yeah.
So if we can't get that little nugget out of you, what is something that you have done that you've seen paid off consistently?
12 years of
where do we
contests. What's the cream that rises to the top consistently?
Well, I would say you need a plan in place well before. If you're scouting for problems, it's too late. You need a plan in place early, and whether that's fertility, seed care, an early fungicide pass if needed, and then just basically, you want to set that plan up for the 819. You want that plant to move along. Now, it is kind of disheartening when not that harvesting 340 bushel corn is disheartening, but that differential between 819 and 340 is kind of, it's hard to chew on. But ultimately, doing everything we can to control, the variables that we can control.
Yeah, that's a tough question. I mean, I like putting us on the spot. I like that. I was trying to think, I mean, you obviously you would say fungicide obviously is something that not everybody does, but seems to have worked. So as a retailer or as a guy selling products to people, they go, well, I don't want to put fungicide on. Well, I asked them, well, it didn't work last year. I said, well, did you not buy crop insurance last year? You didn't need it either, right? I mean, I treat that fungicide as kind of like that as an example. It may not work every year 100%. You may not see 25 bushel every year.
Yeah.
You may see 5. You may see 10. You may see 50. I think we'll see that this year with Southern Rust as bad as it was. But did you not buy crop insurance because you didn't think you didn't need it? No, you bought crop insurance. So I feel like that's how you need to treat it.
Yeah. Jenna, how about in your territory? Is there an AgX product that seems to be working this year?
Across the board this year, GrowPack AI has been an absolute killer for me. It's our seed lubricant micronutrient pack, goes on in the planter. And that for me has been a really big hit across the board. And I cover a fairly big swath, not just Northeast Kansas, but I cover all of Eastern Kansas. So as far as just uniformity across the field in emergence, which if you start looking into how much each day of delayed emergence causes you in yield, it can add up pretty fast, but that's been huge for me. I think we're seeing that across the board in the whole company, that folks are really starting to pick up on how key that is.
So is that for all seed, corn, soybeans, wheat?
Yeah.
It's seed lubricant across the board?
Yep.
You guys use it?
Yes. Yeah.
I'm not particularly familiar with that one, but I'm wanting to get some to try on wheat this fall.
Yeah, I have a little extra.
We're a month
give you
from
trial.
planting wheat, so.
How do you figure out what you want to try?
Well, I think
Peer pressure.
I think well, that's the worst one, especially from the drone guy, and it's muddy and you get a Aggie in the field.
We get him in a
still
truck
here.
and put him between Matt and I.
That's right. Yeah, they actually threatened me on the way out. I thought I'd just disclose that. No, I think you have to have.
Blink twice if you need help.
Yeah, we should have established a safe word earlier. No, but so I think ultimately you have to have an open mind, and I don't know that would necessarily be just limited to products, Corey. I mean, I think ultimately, equipments, methods, timings. I mean, you if you're not willing to try, I don't. Ultimately we've got to improve, and I don't necessarily just mean that from a standpoint that well, we didn't plan very well and corn was $7, and that's not what I necessarily mean. I mean, just generally speaking, we need to improve. We got to get better, with everything we do. Well, if you're not trying anything, ultimately you're just only getting, definition insanity, trying the exact same thing repeatedly and expecting a different outcome.
Yep.
I think a change in mindset is so critical. I think when you look at different products that are on the market and you talk to folks that have tried it, you can look at that as, oh, well, so-and-so down the road tried it and it didn't work for them, I'm not going to give that a shot. Or you can look at it as, hey, they tried something new and it didn't necessarily work out how they did it. How can I improve on that and see what that looks like for me?
Yep.
I think it's a difference in mindset of how you're looking at problems. Are you looking at problems to find a solution, or are you looking at problems to find an excuse?
Yep. What about data analysis? I mean, how important is that? Having quality data, what you want to look at.
Man, I geek out over that stuff.
Well, and I think that's something that we're still, some interpretation, and obviously as we formulate more years, and obviously the quality of data, has improved. I look back to just what, limited amount of true yield mapping or realistic yield mapping we were doing in, just say 2013, compared to now, and the abilities we have, to overlay that into, planting and
anhydrous,
soil
fertilizer.
types, fertilizer application, all of those things.
Yep.
We had a conversation off mics about how your family tries to manage data and trial information. and you don't do it internally. You've
No,
got a partner.
we have a partner, a third party,
Okay.
that helps us with it, and we actually set up what we want to learn ahead of time, right? Just so we can kind of. I mean, it doesn't always end up that way, but we have somewhat of a plan going in.
So it's a theory
I-
that you're testing.
Right.
I like that idea because I've always felt that's the problem as farmers. We get so much data. We get inundated with data anymore. There's so much to weed through. I feel like we get all this data and then we don't ever do anything with it.
Yep.
And I think we're missing opportunities. We're missing efficiencies by not figuring out how
Right.
that data can benefit us.
Do you do that to maybe remove a particular bias? I mean, I don't know anything about your operation. Older generation versus younger generation. Sometimes that's I feel like that's a common struggle.
Yep.
And I'm not even talking maybe turning the reins over but I feel like that if the dad built it that. I say, Corey, I want to run Onward Max on your farm. Well, nope, you're not going to run Onward Max on your farm.
So a couple of reasons, so probably a few reasons, was I came from, before I came back to the farm, I was in more of the research side of things, and so I got to see the difference between good data and bad data, right? Like junk data, you can't make it.
It's actually worse than
harmful.
none.
Right. And so my dad, bless his heart, he wanted to learn. He had trials in every field that he did, every application he went out to do, every seeding, it was crazy. He wanted to learn.
Yep.
He was hungry.
That's awesome.
But the data sucked. We didn't know what worked when we got a yield increase because we had a trial going
hard to
across
quantify.
and all that. So it was bad data. And so we wanted to get to a point where we could take emotion out of the decision. Like when you can see
100%.
consistent results year after year from a third party that has no care to sell you a
You don't
product.
have a particular bias.
Right.
No skin in the game.
Like, you know how easy it is to make that decision?
Yep.
Yeah.
It would clean it up.
You sleep better at
It would
night,
certainly clean it up.
right? I'm trying to take
Even-
emotion out of it.
Even on the flight out here, we were learning that he tried 2 passes of fungicide.
Mhm.
And the first time he left an entire sprayer width across the field, didn't turn it on, right? Great check. But the second time he went through it, the second pass sprayed the whole field. Could we have still left that check and done the same thing, shut it off for the next 120 feet? So now you got to see in this field, what did 2 passes look like compared to 0 passes compared to an early pass?
Yep.
Or if you thought even further ahead, knowing that you were going to do 2 passes, you have 3 trials in that to where you didn't spray the first time, but you did spray the second time.
Sure. Yeah.
To be able to look at it side by side. It's so fascinating that we do want to learn, and sometimes you just aren't prepared.
Yep.
And I think a plan going into something like that is so critical, right? Because you get into the heat of the moment, and if you don't have a plan in place for that, you'll get
won't
somebody
happen.
that says, you know what, I don't have time for that, and it just
Yep.
gets kind of looked over. I think on a lot of operations, I don't think that's just here or there. I think a lot of operations run into that.
Same thing with the data at harvest.
Yep.
Right. You don't want to stop to check that or run that, go and weigh that load out in the scale to see what it did. You just, it's time to go. It's go time. The neighbor's going. I gotta go.
Or it'll
Load the sprayer.
it'll set in climate for 6 months, and then the rep comes by. Well, actually, I
Better look at that.
if I ever
Yeah.
actually broke that down,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
a great idea.
Yep.
Yeah.
So do you have like trials for your trial acres? Like to figure out, to like weed stuff out?
Right. Well,
A pre-trial?
yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
I would say that there's a little self-screening involved.
Yeah.
But and you're exactly right that sometimes the water gets muddied enough that that you've got a planning an in-furrow trial here, and then you ended up you doubled a fungicide pass there, and then I actually left a skip, and sometimes it gets almost manipulated enough you don't know which way to point the finger or give the thumbs up, kind of a deal.
Yep.
And
And I do just say sometimes them accidents turn into really good trials.
Yeah.
As long as you keep track of them and monitor them. Sometimes you're like, oh crap, I forgot to go back and pick up that corner.
Yep.
Well, let's just see what it does.
Yep.
it's interesting you say that about the fungicide trial with your dad, because that's how we started using some fungicide. Just straight old headline.
Yeah.
When it and that I don't even remember what year it would have been. But anyway, we flew a few passes on a farm, and significant differential. And so we decided the next year we'd spray half the farm. Well, then we'd gotten to doing more acres, and it got to where basically instead of spraying a strip and leaving the entire farm untreated, we got to actually basically inverse.
Opposite.
Okay, what is the smallest block that we can possibly
Not
leave?
do it
Because
on.
this is getting too expensive to
not do.
To not do.
That's how I felt
so-
about it. Like when we ran Onward Max last year, I was like, God dang it, I should have put it on every acre, not just half of it.
That's just how it turns out.
Yeah,
sometimes.
I mean, it
I
really
get
does.
upset when I just do it
man.
on more.
Hindsight
Yeah.
can
The
beat
old-
you up.
That's the
Certainly.
farmer's worst enemy, man.
Yep.
Farmer's worst enemy.
On marketing, on economics,
That's our world, man.
Yep.
All of the above.
Hindsight is our world.
Yep. Yep.
Well, the conversation's been great, and I've got so many things on the paper, but we're running out of time for today's conversation. But I want to know from each of you, what are you not going to do next year? What did you learn? What mistake did you make? Whether it was years in the past or you just for sure aren't going to do it. Obviously, we've talked a lot about fungicides, so let's make it something besides that.
What am I not going to do?
Yep. What's a one mistake that you're going to avoid doing next year? Is there anything that the AgX team learned this year that we probably don't need to do any more of because there's a better option?
Product placement, timing, not work with this customer.
I'm not gonna not sell my grain.
Right.
No. I'm not gonna wait to the end to sell my grain. No.
I think just from an AgX perspective, we're really getting timings dialed in. If you were familiar with AgX even probably a few years ago, the timings of some of our very specific like PGR products, they maybe weren't as dialed in as they've gotten now. We have a really well built out, robust agronomy team that has really been focusing on finding the perfect timings for these products. And that's not just our Onward Max or Architect, which are our two PGR lineups, but it's every product we've got. And so they're really dialing in the timings and making sure that what we've got is specific to plant timings, it's specific to yield timings. And so I think that is just going to continue to improve. It's not necessarily something we're not doing. It's just something that I would say has really been improved over the past couple of years. I don't know if that really answers your question, but that's where I'm going to go with it.
I think it gives validity. I mean, agronomist Ben with AgX, I was running some Architect, and he said, "What stage is your corn you're going to put it on?" And I can't remember. I think I said, "Well, our first plant of stuff was like V6, V7." He's like, "Don't put it on that."
Yes.
So to me, he's like, it needs to be V5
Sooner.
or
Before.
a little before,
Before.
and so I was like, oh, he's not just trying to sell volume or another product. He wants to make sure that I have the best chance
That's
of
gonna
this
be
succeeding.
real.
That was kind of my take on what I would not do. Is I won't. I mean, I don't. It's hard to say what I'm not gonna do because I try to only do the things that I feel are gonna work. But I think I want to be more specific and accurate on timings and applications and product placement.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say. I mean, I would compliment on that. I would say that I don't just have a gamut of things that I can say. Well, I absolutely
Won't
not
do
doing
that.
that. But it's probably more like, okay, maybe I need to replicate this on a larger scale. Not maybe be like I always like to think that if I see something that's pretty significant, I like to just throw it in 10%. And maybe it replicates, maybe it shows well again, maybe I need another year, but not just gonna go full bore, but that just try to keep an open mind and move forward with that.
When you get a new product and you try it and say it works for a year or two, or maybe works really good one year and kind of good, like what is your parameter for okay, now it's going on the rest of my acres?
Well, I mean, if it generates a solid ROI over a couple of years' time, I mean, I think it's definitely something we need to implement larger scale. And it may not be anything that I just integrate 100%, out the gate, first year. But more commonly than not, we've seen 2 out of 3 years. That's pretty good percentage.
That's what
I can roll with that.
Yeah, 2 years for me. If I can see it in 2, I mean, I would say that's usually pretty good.
Then your trial just becomes bigger.
It does.
Right. It's still a trial. I feel like all these products are still trials, and even ones we may be using for 5 years, back 5 years before, but you still as a trial to me. Maybe on every acre, but I'm still monitoring it, and I'm still leaving spots where I don't, just to check to make sure that product's still doing what it should be doing.
Have you guys ever seen Dr. Fred Bilo talk?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know how he has his buckets of what, like weather is the most
it is.
important, right?
Yeah.
Thing that affects yield. What is like the one decision that we control that you guys have seen that affects yield the most or ROI the most? Is it seed? Is it tillage? Is it timing?
I don't, I guess I go back to what I said earlier that I feel like we've all gotten really good at what we're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to be profitable and you're going to be in the business and take it seriously, I mean, obviously that's the end goal, but it's those little intricacies, that's why, and I'm not trying to allude, but I guess, I just can't think of one particular silver bullet that I'm like, that's it. That all of a sudden, 819 bushel, here we come. I wish there was.
I mean, I think of it on like the seed side. Like, I mean, we all know like there could be a 40, 50 bushel swing based on the weather, based on, based on
absolutely.
your hybrid decision.
Yep, right. But that's why you try to be diversified, I guess, would be the option. That's the only thing I could say that I would add to that. That's super important, is diversification within it. You don't want to plant 100% on one seed.
Yeah.
One variety, one number. You don't want to do 100% of the same thing on every acre, because in our area anyway, for sure, variability. My favorite motto in our area is, I've given it everything I can, but I can't give it dirt.
When you go to a contest acre, do you go for that racehorse
typical
type hybrid?
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, we endure a lot of nighttime heat, so
Yes.
we've got to have a little bit of
Drought tolerance.
a little bit of drought tolerance, stress tolerance. But yeah, typically, I mean, we need something that'll hit the absolute highs. Otherwise, more of a defensive hybrid on our hill ground, especially more average hill ground. But like I said, there is a lot of things that we've, and it would even go back to you touched on seed. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we were talking about trial and products here. We've been talking about that for quite a while.
Yep.
But I mean, you need to be open minded,
Try
in my
hybrids.
opinion. And Corey, what you said earlier, I love that. As far as the third party deal, and I could see that a huge benefiting factor on seed, because Bob down the road sells brand X and he brings 6 bags over.
Yep.
Well, sometimes that's on the pallet and we're trying to finish up, just dump it in.
Yep.
Right.
And then Bob comes around, well, Corey, how was brand X seed?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
that happened to us last year.
Actually, you know what? It was okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah. And
And so I mean, I love that idea.
right. And that brand X may have failed, but that's because the practice you did on it didn't line up with the hybrid that was planted there.
It
Yeah. Put
happened
it on
to
the
us
right
last
acre.
year. We
Yeah.
were trying for give corn seed a different look at it, and it was last field we planted, and we dumped the first couple of bags in before the other hybrid had ran out. So
you had a blend.
So you had blend, and then we ran out. So then you put it back in there, and you never really made a great mark as to what it was, and ultimately we still didn't have enough to finish. So the other part of that pass got put in somebody else's seed.
And then you're looking at yield data, and you're like, well, I think it was the third telephone pole, from the left, and then
Forgot to change it on the monitor.
You catch it in 2 or 3 different passes with the combine. So it's like, well, we really don't know.
Sprayer run over 2 rows on one of those, and so it just
I do think that's important that we keep that in mind. Is I think you want a racehorse variety, but I think also having the racehorse variety is important to pair that with your practices on the farm, and everybody does that differently. And I think seed companies are digging deeper into these seeds and really what they benefit on and how they like their fertility and upfront nitrogen or late nitrogen and fungicide. Everybody gives you a score now of how well that responds to a fungicide application. So you get 6 bags, you put it in, and you put 1 pass of fungicide on it, and it likes it later in the year, or it likes some top dress and you didn't top dress it. Well, then of course that seed's going to fail.
Yep.
I think that really speaks to kind of tie this all back in. You asked what management decision really could affect the most, and I think it's being able to manage to the acre. I don't think it's managing farm wide. I think if you can dig down and know your acres, know your fields, know what it needs, know what it likes, and you can manage directly to that. I think that has the ability to impact more on your farm than any other decision you make, because everything that you're doing, whether it's a foliar application, whether it's your fertility, whether it's your seed, you have to know where it's going and how that's going to react to what the situation is you're putting it into. So I think being able to manage to the acre and to the situation you're in specifically that year, which would include weather, which is a major impactor,
Yeah.
I think is a critical skill on the farm.
I think that was a great way to bring the episode kind of all encompassed. I wrote down a lot of things, and I appreciate that, because if I wrote them down, somebody's going to pick them up as a benefit, or at least a nugget that they can consider. Driving to find an efficient way to manage that plant was one thing that I noted out. It was cool when you said if you step out of your bubble, you don't have your preconceived notions. So if you want to try pushing a crop, maybe it's one you haven't planted before. Same thing, start with small trials, then bring it into parts of your operation at a little bit larger scale. And it was interesting the perspective you shared, both of you. First, with you, Matt, about you kind of plan to protect. But then the same thing of how you shared, Alex, that entering the contest is something that drove you to try and be better. There's a little extra push.
Ultimately, that's the end goal.
Yeah.
I mean, if you stay in the same spot, you're always going to be in the same spot. But
I still think we need to kick off some way, somehow, high ROI contest rather than the national yield.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
I've always thought that and asked that when, they give these great numbers, and I'm super proud of these guys and always envy these guys that are having these high yields, but you don't ever get to see the ROI on any of them.
And I think that's on a lot of people's minds. When I talk to folks about, Alex or whichever high yield customer we're talking about, they say, well, how profitable is that? It's on everybody's mind when they see these high yields, like, is it profitable? Are they making an ROI on that? So I think that's a really cool idea.
Yeah.
Do they require you to say what you? I mean, I know that you usually put your hybrid down.
They do have. They've got a
practice.
nitrogen management contest now that, and I haven't engaged into it as far as I'm going to say policing. How to how that's all handled.
Yep.
Now it's basically open disclosure as far as what you as much or as little in the nuts and bolts of your management practice. Now I will say. To complement what Jenna said, so yes, we do have more invested in our contest acres, but our use efficiencies are better. And so, I touched on it earlier, but, if you can kind of generate that kind of microclimate, so to speak, that plant's more efficient. And so, as far as some of your nuts and bolts inputs and whatever, we're actually significantly more efficient with those acres and raising more bushels than we actually are on on kind of a standard practice.
So if that's the case, why not do it on all?
We're in a tough spot in our area that we get
He's
a
got
lot
those
of
niche soils.
daytime,
Right, I was
going to
say nighttime
heat.
temperature and our variability in our soils. Where he's to have his contest is some in really good dirt, and we just don't have that everywhere.
But we have been, and it's not anything. It's not as earth shattering, but we have been able to build. And do you attribute that to a controlled drop planter, whether it's an Exactamerge or a precision planting or whatever it may be, or another management or an AgXplore product or a seed hybrid, what do you attribute to these? But so my first dryland contest in 2013 was 259 bushel an acre.
That's what I was going to say. I would say we are implementing these practices because our yields are getting better.
And that's what I didn't know if, in 2013, if I'd probably live long enough to actually replicate that or beat it, and here we go, 9, 10, 11 crop years, and able to put, better part of, 80 bushel on it. I think that we are getting better, and we are to some extent, as much as we can manage it, we are trying to integrate that into a whole spectrum.
Yep.
And I think that kind of comes back to they're managing their acres different because their acres are very different, right? They're managing each acre as it
you
potential
could go
stands.
Put more money on those other acres, but it's more risky.
So
if it fails,
yes,
you are out that extra.
Right.
Yep.
100%.
That's good. This has been a good show. I really appreciate, you all traveling up here.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Hopefully you were in more than a regular cab pickup, so you didn't sit, buddy.
We were.
I sat in the back seat. I
There
let
you
him
go.
sit in the front. And he's the show here today. So
I don't know about that.
No, it was a pleasure, and I hope that we get to check in with you again.
Yeah.
I can't wait until the news comes out about your wheat.
Yeah.
We'll make sure
I
to
think
share that as well.
early to mid-October,
Okay.
I believe.
It'll be about the same time as this show, so it'll be really great.
Yep.
Be really
Awesome.
cool. I appreciate you. Thanks again for bringing them up. We always appreciate our partnership with AgXplore. If you have any questions or want to learn more about them, they are more than willing to educate, not sell. They'll still sell your product, but we've learned very, very early on that it is all about educating you to make the right decision for your farm. So thanks again for choosing Farm for Profit. We appreciate you as always. So until next time, have a good one.
Farm for Profit Podcast. Take a listen, have a blast. Farm for Profit Podcast.